Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Opinionated Lushes. Today is a very special episode because we are inviting back one guest and a new one. So here's Trevor and Carly from Epilepsy South Central Ontario. If you two want to introduce yourselves, get a little bit more specific of what you do.
I'll start. My name is Trevor Gordon. I'm the Community Engagement Media Relations person at Epilepsy South Central Ontario, and I'm excited that I was able to get my colleague involved in this, and I'd love to introduce Carly Smith. Take it away.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm not sure what happened to ladies first, but we'll roll with it. So, yeah, my name is Carly, and as Trevor mentioned, we're colleagues at Epilepsy South Central Ontario. We both wear a number of hats and do a number of things that, may differ from day to day, but my focus is on youth and young adults. So I run support groups for young adults and teens who are living with epilepsy. I'm also an epilepsy educator. So basically teaching everybody about what epilepsy is, mostly in the schools. But there is, the odd, workplace or community fair. So that's my job, is to spread the education and make sure the teens and the young adults are well supported.
I really appreciate that because, so some of our listeners know my 13-year-old son has epilepsy. And when he got diagnosed, I knew nothing. I knew one kind of seizure, and that was obviously the super dramatic kind. And that was it. So here I am, just learning in the world of epilepsy. And it's like there's so much that's like either misinformation or people just don't know. So yeah. So I appreciate
so surprised when I tell them there's over 40 seizures.
Right. That's my point.
What?
I feel doctors need more education too, because we were struggling right now with my child, and Trevor was amazing and sent me to the right people to ask for help the last time he was on here. But to get a referral here, I live in New Brunswick, there's only 2 pediatric neurologists, no really any doctors, and then we have like an online service, and it's to their discretion if they feel that they should do a referral. So, and then it's just, we still haven't had the proper referral. It's people say things and that doesn't happen. So now we have to find another doctor who will. So it's been a fun experience because they just whatever. So it's fun. Well, sarcastically, but
The one thing I've noticed with neurologists, and Carly could probably speak on this much better, is I've noticed sort of a neurologist that's sort of straight out of schooling will know all the terminology and be really on point, whereas maybe a well-experienced neurologist that's been doing it for a minute and might be older, might be really experienced, but they might not be keeping up always with the new terminology. They might sometimes still say grand mal seizure, for example, and they might, so that I feel sometimes creates confusion for the clients sometimes, because they're hearing grand mal seizure where it's called tonic-clonic, and it creates confusion, like who's right, who's wrong.
Yeah,
I definitely think I hear the term grand mal way more than I hear tonic-clonic from people. And then I usually have to politely correct them and say, well, that is an older term, but it is still referring to the same seizure, but it's called this now. And we kind of go along with that. But I kind of like the terminology now because it tells us what's actually happening. Whereas, grand mal is telling us, oh, this one's big and bad, and petite mal, this one's a little bit bad. And that doesn't really tell us much at all.
Yeah, when I'm talking with people, especially older people, and I'm explaining my son's seizures and stuff, whenever I say tonic-clonic, I always have to say like a grand mal, because I have to clarify it for them, even though it's the wrong terminology, because they have no.
Yeah.
Like I said, most people have no idea. The average person, even, I would say.
And we've talked about this before too, that as much as I'm all into social media and the internet and making sure everything is current on our website, the problem with the internet is one very simple thing. All the old information still is there. So I can work my butt off to make sure the website's accurate and to make sure all of our social media is correct and everything's on point, but the old information still remains. And I know we've talked about this before, but I can't imagine someone who is just diagnosed with epilepsy and then they start to Google things and start to learn what's the next steps, and they see 100 or multiple different definitions about what a seizure is or what happens, what do you do with first aid. And I know that's one of the things we wanted to talk about is myths.
Yes.
And when people still think that you can put something in someone's mouth, that might have been a thought, almost 100 years ago, but that's not correct. So that's my frustration, is that old information still stays on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what kind of myths do you two hear like a lot? Like you just mentioned the sticking, so what, they don't bite their tongue or whatever it was that they told you, and don't stick. Yeah, it's like, why? They're like, you can obviously make it so they can't breathe. Like, don't do that. That's dumb. But what other myths have you guys had to deal with or heard or had to re-educate maybe in regards to epilepsy?
For me, one that I get a lot working with, especially with, teenagers and young adults, a lot of the times people think that it's, a mental illness and it's, psychological in nature. And they just don't understand that it's actually a neurological condition. And so that just kind of, adds to that big cloud of stigma. And that is something that I love to, make sure people are aware of. It's something you can't control. It's something, you can't, just stop a seizure. It usually runs its course. Of course, medications can help, but for the most part, this is, something that's happening to someone, not something that they're choosing, so that's one that really bugs me a lot. Even I've had a neuropsychiatrist actually tell one of my clients to think herself out of her seizures. It was ridiculous. And even her parents were like enraged. And
yeah, I was going to say, as a mom, I would scream. Are you kidding?
I get, telling someone to practice, some stress techniques or try not to get too anxious. Maybe this will, help lower the amount you're having. But you can't think yourself out of a seizure. That's absolutely ridiculous. And to know that this came from a neuropsychiatrist was so disheartening and so awful and really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Even just the things that we keep hearing about, all these supposed treatments for curing epilepsy or curing your seizures, like it's just some of these things that are out there, and or even Carl, I know we've talked about like people saying that having seizures is like witchcraft or like.
I was gonna say, I was like, a lot of people used to be like, if you were having seizures, like they'd exorcise you, like like overly cult like religious stuff, and it's like no, like they can't control that, and like what? Yeah.
That actually happened just last year. Sorry, Trevor.
Okay, continue.
No, it's just, I remember last year, I can't remember the name of, I believe it was like a religious school, but there was, in British Columbia, I believe it was, there was a boy that they were actually trying to perform an exorcism on as he was having a seizure. And to think that that's still happening till this day is pretty scary.
Well, also the big myth is that all seizures look the same, or like a seizure is what you see in movies of just someone, on the ground shaking, and that's even things that I saw on TikTok when people were doing these sort of seizure challenges, or
oh gosh,
where it was like making fun of I forget what movie that what came out, that it was a big protest where they were making fun of how someone has a seizure, to know that, again, that's one type of seizure. And even that is a little more extra and more dramatic in some of these movies, right? Or another one being that everyone will get affected by flashing lights. Not everyone has that type of seizure or that type of epilepsy where you're affected by flashing lights. And even from me learning this, what we've learned from a couple of our clients, that even if you are affected with flashing lights, it's not always the same for one person versus another. I know with one of our events, a culinary showdown, the type of lights affected one person, but it didn't affect another person that deals with that type of photosensitive epilepsy.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, like, with my son, like, he's fine with video game flashing lights, but if we're outside and we're driving in the car and the sun's going through the trees, that will trigger his seizures. So it's like, yeah, like and one of his biggest triggers is actually heat. So if he's overheating, he'll start like because he has absence seizures, and eyelid myoclonia. So his eyelids will flutter and that kind of stuff. Which our doctor, speaking of crappy doctors, diagnosed as a tick for 2 years. So yeah, like when you meet one person with epilepsy, you met one person with epilepsy. Like you have no idea like what types of seizures, multiple types of seizures, what medications they're on can affect certain things. Like there's so much out there, and yeah, a lot of misinformation on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we hope to kind of, mitigate, is that, correcting people and busting those myths and breaking down that stigma, because yeah, as we've talked about, like some of it is just wild.
Insane. It's especially like I get the ignorance from like strangers, but like the medical professions, like they should know, like that's where you're going to get support. They should stop brushing people off and go up their knowledge. Like it's just it's even like
do something about it.
And it's not just older doctors, it's younger doctors too. They just skip that class. I don't know what the topic was, only like 2 hours long, and then they're like, okay, well, I'm just going in general medicine, so I don't have to worry about that. But the problem is that you use the general medicine doctors to get your referrals, so they should be a little more knowledgeable about these things. You think?
At the very least, send for tests.
Yeah.
But can I also just let out a loud vent about one thing too?
Like, yes, of course.
Epilepsy is not a rare condition. It might be a hidden condition, but it's not a rare condition. 1 in 100 Canadians have epilepsy. 1 in 100 Canadians have epilepsy. That's over 260,000 Canadians in Canada have epilepsy. Some people with epilepsy might not be comfortable with talking about it, and that's their decision, but it's a hidden condition, not a rare condition. So when it's known as the third, if not second most common neurological condition, but we're not getting government funding, that's frustrating.
Yeah.
So that's I know there's 100 myths out there, but that's the myth that sort of gets me riled up, is that it's this rare condition that, it's not as big as, other conditions. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. They're all to whoever happens to have certain conditions, but it's not something epilepsy is not something to be swept underneath the rug.
No, we talked about this the last time you were here. Like, it's ridiculous that such a common condition has absolutely like no government funding for it. It's not even like you're underfunded like by the government. It's like there's no government funding. Like it's like what? Like that's ridiculous. And with a number like 1 in 100, it's like most people probably know someone or work with someone or have been around someone that has epilepsy, and like what do we have resources, obviously, like you guys and that kind of stuff, but it's not enough at all. So
well, think about something. You get told, you go to the hospital or you go to your neurologist and you get told you have epilepsy. All right, so now have a good day.
Yep.
Now you leave the hospital You've been told this news that's not the most positive news. It's not something that's going to stop things, but it might create a roadblock or two, and you're scared, you're nervous, you get told something. But sometimes not all neurologists even happen to know there's an agency like Epilepsy South Central Ontario out there. So, but knowing that you're getting told to go out in the world and now you have epilepsy, and then you're dealing with people that might see you have a seizure and call 911 every time you have a seizure. There's so much confusion out there about even what to do if someone has a seizure. And know that there is agencies out there that can sort of help with the community or education. And again, Carly can talk about all the things that she does on a day-to-day basis, but it's just unreal that once you get told you have epilepsy, now what? You know, it's just frustrating.
Yeah. And a lot of the time I find too that people are in such like a distressing state that they end up turning to Dr. Google and, you know, learning all these things that may not be true. And then they're like just back down the rabbit hole, and that it, you know, makes the cycle like 10 times worse because, you know, like we said in the beginning, they're hearing this, but then they're also hearing this. And how do they know what's reputable or not? And if it, you know, a neurologist or a doctor took, you know, 2 seconds to just mention, hey, you know what? I'd like you to check out this organization. They exist. They can give you correct information. They can give you counseling, support, anything that, you know, you need. It's such a valuable resource that we're trying to provide. And it's so it's so easy for a neurologist to just tell their patients, or even just, you know, putting our flyers in their rooms or things like that. Like it's baffling that, you know, they just care about the patient in that, you know, say 15-minute window that they've got with them. They're not thinking about what's happening, you know, once they leave that office. And that's not the kind of doctor you want to have. And unfortunately, it's rare to find one that isn't like that.
It's the one we get.
Yeah, well, that's literally it. And I find like in that 15 minutes, a lot of the times they're just pushing like a specific medication or something. And then that doesn't deal with any of the issues like that epilepsy can cause or that the medication can cause. Because my son's short-term memory, gone. Like it's debilitating. And like there's only so much you can do with that 15-minute appointment with your doctor. And I just want to say, at least like the meds are covered until my son is 25. But if you went to a hospital, got diagnosed with epilepsy, got prescribed a medication, and then didn't have like any health coverage, you're paying for that out of pocket too. And it's like, if you know nothing about epilepsy, you're going to start debating like, how worth it is it? You know? So yeah. there's a like to our non-Canadian listeners out there, welcome to the Canadian healthcare system. I can go to the emergency room and I can get diagnosed with epilepsy, but I won't have to any resources or be able to pay for the medication. Canada. Like,
I've even seen people being prescribed medications that aren't available in Canada, and then they're expected to just find these medications elsewhere or apply. They have to go through like certain application processes to get it, you know, allowed into Canada, or, you know, have it approved. And it's just, yeah, I don't understand how someone is, you know, made to go through that and not, you know, follow it up more, or just take the 2 minutes to send them where they should be.
I don't think I found you guys through my neurologist. I think I Googled it. It was like epilepsy in South Ontario, because that's where I am. And luckily, that was enough keywords for the website to pop up. But yeah, I don't think my neurologist like said anything about outside
that's the frustration. It's like, good on you, Jessica, that you're being a proactive, amazing mom, right? That knows how to Google, well, not just knows how to Google, but is obviously thinking a little outside the box of like, there has to be something out there, that you're not alone in this, right? But you would think, you would hope, and I'm not saying this bad about all neurologists. There's many really amazing neurologists out there, one being on our board that obviously, you know, mentions Epilepsy South Central. This is the next step, that there are, you know, in Ontario, there's 14 epilepsy organizations. Across Canada, there's 22 or 23 epilepsy organizations. So the very least that you can do as a neurologist after you've given some information to this person that's getting told this information for the first time, you know, there's options, there's things, there's support groups out there. You're not alone. You'll meet someone as amazing like Carly that runs a youth empowerment program if you're in that age bracket, so that you can, you know, meet other people that with this condition, or you join a parents group, or you meet other adults. Like there's other things going on there, so that, you know, you might know a lot about epilepsy, but maybe your family member doesn't. A lot of times I'll say that to a client: you probably know everything about epilepsy, but there's someone in your family that might not know. Here's a book, give it to that one family member that is going to call 911 every time you have a seizure. This is not what to do, right?
Yeah, for sure. So we talked about how you guys get no government funding. So do you want to talk a bit about like what if the government funded, what they would be funding? What kind of programs and supports, you know, that you guys offer, and would love to increase if that funding was there?
I'll let Carly answer that question, but let me just answer on the government side of what we're even asking the government. We were asking the government of Ontario, for like $3 million, just to be clear.
That's
14
pennies.
agencies, not just one.
And not to, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Carly. Not to fund Epilepsy South Central Ontario, to fund 14 epilepsy organizations. Keep the lights on, to keep programs and services free for those clients living with epilepsy. We're asking for $3 million. And in government standards, that's like finding $20 in your couch.
Yeah, it's nothing.
So $3 million we were asking the government. And this actually, from in our budget ask, would actually save the taxpayers money, because it would hopefully stop people from calling 911. You're going to have Carly doing education to the community with that funding, so that people know the emergency room won't be full of people that are having seizures from 911 calls. But I will let Carly talk about all the amazing services that she does and why this funding is important.
Yeah, so from, you know, the perspective of my work and what I do, I mean, I do try my best to get, you know, the teens and the young adults out into the community. It was a bit of a struggle over the last, you know, couple years just with the pandemic, but all that aside, we got an individual grant at one point where I was able to implement, you know, a few of the things that I wanted to do, like outings in the community, you know, taking them go-karting because they can't drive, and things like rock climbing or swimming, things that they think that they aren't supposed to do, or their parents won't let them do it. They can now do it in a safe environment and with other people who just get it, and they don't have to worry, like, how am I gonna look, you know, if I have a seizure, because everybody just gets it. And so to have had a bit of a taste of that, and to be able to offer that, and then go into the pandemic, and then, you know, having absolutely nothing, looking for maybe, you know, donated activities is, you know, it takes some time up. And yeah, so if we just had that money to, you know, implement some of the things that we already have in our, you know, dream list of what we want to be able to provide, there's so many things that I have, you know, just waiting to be implemented once we get funding, hopefully when we get funding. But it's just so hard because I guess people already assume we're government funding, so I think that plays a big part in it. But there's also things that people might not even think of that, you know, we can help with. So something that, you know, I think would be a great, you know, venture to be able to help with the you know, the students, you know, the ones that are trying to enter the workforce, is transportation, because people with epilepsy can't drive if you know, their seizures haven't been controlled for a certain amount of time. So at one point, I was able to distribute a very small amount of Presto cards and, you know, load them with $10 here and there. But if we could provide, you know, transportation means, and it's just that simple, you know, giving somebody, you know, a Presto card with a loaded funds, you know, that gives them independence. They're able to go out on their own. They can take a bus, they can travel. They don't have to worry about, the minimal amount in their bank account that they get from, probably government assistance for living. And there's just so much that we can be doing to bring people together, but not having that space to do it, or having those meaningful activities to, foster those connections. It's led us to be, more online, which is great because we're reaching a lot more people. But I find that we want to be reaching these people in person. So I want to plan, activities in different areas instead of having to keep everything online, because we can't afford to, do multiple activities in different areas and leaving some people out. And yeah, I think I could go on and on. Please, stop me when you
Well,
think
I
it's
was
good
that
enough.
driving piece, like, well, especially when you mentioned go-karting, like that's so smart because like my son has a rare form of epilepsy, so he'll never get control. So he had to like come to terms with the fact he'll never drive a car at age 8. And like if people don't understand, like I'm a 32-year-old woman who doesn't have my driver's license, but that's by choice.
Yeah.
I'm choosing not to drive. But when you're like, a young kid, you're looking up at all the adults and stuff like that, and then you have to like come to that real life. Like that's traumatic personally. And like,
Yeah.
a lot of the things these kids and, teens go through, bullying comes to mind. My son was bullied a lot for his seizures, and stuff like that. So it's nice to like have like it would be nice to have a space for them to like go and connect more and that kind of stuff. Like my son even went to Sunny Days day camp pre-pandemic, and I think he saw his first seizure there. And that was a huge like cuz he'd never seen a seizure before. So,
Yeah. And that's
yeah.
what we aim for, is to make it just normalized for the kids, to make them feel like they're a part of a community that's just like them. And Sunny Days Camp is one of like our staple programs, but it's so hard each year, applying for that funding to Canada Summer Jobs and just waiting to hear back. Like, will we be able to run Sunny Days Camp this year? And the thought to think that maybe one day we might, not get that funding is scary, because so many
Mhm.
families like rely on this program during the summer for their kids. We've seen such huge changes in, kids' personalities after they spend a summer at Sunny Days. We've seen reduction in seizures afterwards because they're just so busy and their mind is so stimulated and they're just having such a great time that they're less likely to have a seizure there. And it's just something that we would, it would be awful to think that we couldn't run that one year just because we don't have that funding. And that's something we have to go through each year.
I know you particularly work with like young people and teens and that kind of stuff. But what programs are like, is there anything like offered for like older people, say if you got diagnosed as an adult with epilepsy and you weren't sure where to turn? Yeah. Is there any programs out there for that yet or in the talks?
Yeah, not so much programs that are in person, but we do have another colleague of ours. His name is Josh, and he actually works with adults and families. So he provides things like support groups to parents, to adults with epilepsy, as well as individual counseling and things like that. So um, that's pretty much like his wheelhouse. And then we also try and, sometimes integrate, these activities to include the whole family. So, for example, what comes to mind that's not too far away is our family and youth conference, where, it's only once a year, but it's something that some of our families look so forward to, because, the parents are meeting other parents that, know what it's like. The kids are, bonding with kids that know what it's like. And then the youth are also bonding, with youth that know what it's like. But then at the end of the day, they're still there as a family. They're, learning, they're becoming stronger. They're, just like, proving that sense of community. And I wish it was something that we could do more than once a year. Um, so yeah, I mean, I can't speak too much on everything that he does. I'm sure there's much more that I'm unaware of in his day to day. But we do offer programs and services for adults, because epilepsy, doesn't discriminate. It can hit you at any age, any time. Doesn't mean everyone's, going to get epilepsy, but we like to say that potentially, highlighted, potentially.
Everyone has a brain.
Yeah, we all have a brain, so we can all potentially have a seizure because we've got neurons and they can misfire.
Yeah. So you hear that, government? Yeah, I'm talking to you.
The
Meet me in the parking lot at 3. It's so frustrating because like there's okay, I'm gonna get a little political here. Ooh. We heard about what Ford's giving to the police people, right? The people, police, men, police officers.
People?
There we go.
Yeah.
About how they're like full tuition covered right out of high school. Like, come on, man.
That's because you have a son-in-law that's a police officer. That's why.
It's so frustrating when, especially when it's like a problem like that or like a systemic issue and you can't do like as an individual, you can't really do anything about it. And it makes me real mad. And like I need to go to like a smash room or something, like one of those break rooms or axe throwing. I don't know, something to get that pent out rage because apparently like, there's nothing else to do. So it makes me so mad to hear about the programs that exist or could be more readily accessible or could be, more frequent for everyone else. And it's just like, the money is there. Though you can't even say the money's there. Like they're not giving it to you. Like that's it. And it makes me mad. It makes me mad, especially as a parent of a child with epilepsy. It just makes me mad. Oh my God.
But just based on the simple thing of like, we've all had to go to the emergency room for whatever reason, whether it happened to you or you had a friend or a family member, and whether it be before COVID or during COVID, the waiting room at an emergency, waiting for Emerge, it is unreal. 2-hour, 3-hour wait times, right? Mm-hmm. And to think that we're trying to come up with a program to the government, a budget submission, to say and I'm speaking to the taxpayers, we're telling the government, give us $3 million, and we're trying our best to keep that emergency room empty from people that are calling 911 when a person has a seizure.
Yeah.
Like, it should not be full of people having a seizure. There, of course, are cases where, yes, I understand why you should call 911. If it's lasting longer than 5 minutes, there are reasons to call 911. I'm not trying to say that. But for the most part, an average seizure, you should not have to call 911. And there's probably much bigger situations that deserve to be in the emergency room than someone having a seizure. So we're trying to save taxpayers money, give us $3 million, which is like $20 on the couch. And not to fund one epilepsy organization, fund 14 epilepsy organizations in Ontario that will help the community and keep clients living with epilepsy attending programs and services like Carly's talking about for free. Like, I don't know.
It's such a simple ask.
It's not a math petition, but it's easy math.
Yeah, it's like such a simple ask, and it's like they're just. And like they're just saying no, or they're just ignoring it, and it's frustrating. I've seen you guys like set up protest. Well, not maybe you guys specifically, but I have seen like epilepsy protests asking the government for money, like in front of the government building and stuff like that.
Oh, we've been to Queen's Park, Jessica.
Yeah,
we've been to Queen's Park. We have been to Queen's Park. All of us. I'm throwing myself under the bus. I've hit up every MP in our coverage area, and we cover all of South Central Ontario, so that's at least 25 MPPs, and they've all told us, oh, we love your budget ask. It makes complete sense. We want to do this. But for some reason,
they just can't get it done.
We're not getting the whatever. But we've been to Queen's Park. Like, I've been in that room. I've walked the halls, and our CEO has we've all been, and the public, whoever's listening to this, the public has been amazing, has been sending all their letters to their local MPPs. They've been coming to Queen's Park. We're doing everything we can do other than grab the money from their bank account. Like,
that's the next step. I'm kidding. Jokes for legal reasons.
And
This is all alleged. You're good.
I was going to also add too, is that it's not because they don't know we're here. I mean, like Trevor said, he does a great job of, putting us out there and what we need. And I remember one year we thought we were so close, and it was, we had so much hope because we were invited to Queen's Park. We weren't sure exactly why. We were told for a lunch to, proclaim Purple Day, and it was very exciting news. We thought, hey, maybe they're going to be making a big announcement. And we were like, yeah, like we just had our fingers crossed. And so they had recognized us, which was great. But that's where it kind of ended. It was just, here's some sandwiches, some cupcakes, and, thanks for coming out. And that was just such a disheartening experience for me. So that was one of my first, unfortunate experiences that, I keep remembering because it was just such a glimmer of hope. And then, enjoy your cake. Happy Purple Day.
It's like they were just trying to like appease you to be like, oh yeah, we noticed. And then just hope that like, that would be like that. They gave you like a crumb, and it's like, see, that's fine. Like that's like it almost feels like worse that they did
just
that.
Muting us.
Yeah, it was like if they had just ignored you, at least like they're ignoring you, but like acknowledging what you're asking for, and then just not providing it, like that's almost worse to me.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like that was like if someone's offering me a cookie. And then I go to grab the cookie and they're like, actually, no, I just given you the recipe. I would be upset. I would be, I think it'd be worse if it would have been better if you just didn't show me the cookie at all, kind of thing. And that's why it's frustrating. That's why I'm venting, because I get so mad at this topic, because as an individual, even as like a group of people, even getting noticed, it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah, right, Trevor?
This is what we deal with every day, and it's just frustrating. And I've gotten to know many politicians in my day-to-day job, and they're all good people, and I have great conversations with them. I compare politicians like WWE wrestling. Like, I feel like I've seen behind the curtain. They all, like, as much as you see them, all the opposite parties like going at each other, like they all seem to get along behind the curtains. But it's just like they're all nice people per se. But when it comes to like signing the check and like making the major decision, for whatever reason, we're just not getting, that magic for us. And it's frustrating because, again, we're not asking to fund one agency. We're asking to fund 14 agencies. So if I can speak to your viewers right now, I'm asking, even though you guys have been kind enough in the past to help us with this, can you please contact your local MPP, and even the people that are in the US, contact your fellow Canadian family members and friends, and Jessica and Dawn and everyone, just like contact MPPs and say there's epilepsy organizations in Canada, Ontario first. I'm biased to my province, but yeah. Canada, we need funding. And please bug your MPP, bug your mayors, bug your prime minister. Like, we need funding. We need funding. We need funding, because there's amazing services. Carly Smith and a lot of clients, managers are running out there, and we're not going to have funding eventually, and we're going to have to close doors, and we're going to have to cut Sunny Days Camp. We're going to have to cut a lot of programs. And I don't think people realize that, as much as Carly's amazing, we need to keep the doors open to have these programs going,
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Carly wants to keep, living too. Like, people need jobs.
I mean, I love my job, but I also like to eat.
Yeah.
And, sleep in a bed. So, we're not asking for too much, just enough to, live and do what I do best.
Well, if you guys end up going to Queen's Park to protest and stuff again, let us know. We'll bring a big opinionated lushes sign. Maybe we'll live stream it. I don't know.
That'd be awesome. That would be great. That would
Just
be so fun.
Yeah, because it again, like it touched, two of our hosts right now, having to deal with it. And it's just so frustrating when you're like people you're supposed to be voting for are not doing what you're voting for them to do. And it's like you can only have so many excuses.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, why can't you do this thing? Like, explain it to me like I'm 5. Why? Like, that's where I get frustrated with it, because no
But
good.
But it
using
always
jargon,
seems like
you
the
don't even
opposite, I'd say, because then what they're saying to us doesn't make any sense, and we're also looking at them like they're 5. Like, what are you even talking about? Like, you
Because
can't
they
afford
are
to help
5. Let's be honest.
them?
It's a bunch of 5-year-olds given a province. That's what I'm describing our current provincial government is a bunch of 5-year-olds taking over a province. That's compared to like what's been going on. That's I don't think anyone would argue with me about
It's
that.
like, how are they making these decisions? Is it a game of rock, paper, scissors? Are they, shooting hoops
Eeny,
to
meeny,
see
miny, mo.
what they're gonna do? Yeah.
Darts at a wall.
What's their thought process behind everything, especially the things that are overfunded?
Well, and like we were talking about how emergency rooms are like overcrowded nowadays. I mean, especially having to deal with COVID and everything. And on top of that, there's emergency rooms in some areas closing because of how the provincial government has been running healthcare. And now it's like, okay, so what's supposed to happen? Like now you have a person with a seizure, you know nothing about seizures because there's no education for you and there's no hospital. Like, what do you do? Like it's almost dystopian at this point for me. Because we're gonna have the same. I'm gonna invite you guys back and we're gonna have the same conversation again.
Mhm.
That's the
Why? I mean, Jessica, I came by myself and I said, I'm coming back and I'm bringing in the heat. I'm bringing Carly here because I knew Carly was going to come here and she was going to like come in with all her programs and all her knowledge. And I'm like, we need to tell everyone, like, we need funding. And it's not just because we're just wanting to say it for the fun of it. Like, there's 1 in 100 Canadians have epilepsy, and they don't want to just be told, "Hey, I have epilepsy" from a neurologist. They need to get support. They need to get education, and like again, you might get diagnosed with epilepsy, and you might know some stuff about epilepsy. But what about all your family members? What about your friends? What about like education is key? Like I work right beside Carly in the office. I hear Carly doing webinars with offices and schools and one-on-one and groups. Like she's teaching Canadians what to do if you have a seizure, what to do if it happens in the workplace, what to do at a school, what to do when you're trying to apply for a job, what to tell an employer. Like Carly deals with so much in an 8-hour period. Like it's unreal. Like if she's only one person, like we need to hire many.
We need to fund more Carlys. Come on,
get the factory started.
Just a
I would love a
machine.
twin. Yeah, that could help me out. That'd be so awesome.
Start cloning.
Yeah, we just
Yeah.
clone Carlys for the world. That'll be our political platform when we eventually run.
That's right.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add a lot of what we do too, hasn't even been talked about today. There's so many other things that we do, and one thing that actually just kind of came to mind as we've been speaking is, the advocacy that I provide in schools is something that's very, near and dear to my heart because it gets me frustrated. It gets me, going, and it's something I want to mitigate. And something that just popped up, that happened not too long ago, which should not be happening, is I've been working with a parent who has a young child who has seizures, and they're relatively well controlled. But she had reached out to me, asked me to talk with the school. The school was great the year before. They welcomed me to present to the students for our grade 5 thinking about epilepsy presentation that we do adapt for other grades. So that was awesome. And then I thought, well, they'll definitely want to welcome me back the following year for, staff education because they didn't get that. And so here's me and, mom reaching out to the principal since last year, trying to offer this training, and we're just not getting any response. And then I got, a phone call from this mom, and she doesn't call me too often. So I usually know if she's giving me a call that, it's going to be something worth talking about. Otherwise, I just get an email. And so it just so happened that she was dropping her child off at school, and he had done his thing, and she was just kind of chatting with other parents. I think she was near the office, and she just kind of noticed that there was like this panic, and she can hear what's going on the staff walkie talkies, and another student was actually having a tonic-clonic seizure. And the staff just went into panic. They didn't know what to do. They were freaking out, and they asked this mother of not this child, but yet another child, what to do. Can you help? And so we've been trying to give them this free training since last year that they're not asking for, so they don't have to go into this panic. No mother should be, responsible for another person's child. Of course, you're going to do it out of the goodness of your heart. And of course she did. She, did the simple things that you do when someone's having a seizure, like, turning them onto their side, timing it, those simple things that keep people so safe. They had no idea what to do, and they were freaking out. And what if she wasn't there? She just happened to, kind of showed up a little bit early. And there's so many ways that I can go down an alley where that's just so wrong.
Yeah.
It's funny to me that you brought up again, like, teachers and whatever not taking this training, because I remember us talking with Trevor that like free training to like professionals in a workplace where they might deal with seizures would be like an issue. And I know we talked about the police and how we're gonna have all these newly uneducated police officers. And now these newly uneducated police officers probably still aren't going to take police the epilepsy training.
Isn't it ironic that teachers want to take something that's not mandatory? Didn't teachers tell us when we were kids, like, oh yeah, you can do these courses, but also if you want to do something, it's not mandatory, but you might get some bonus credit if you do it. You don't do those courses, because you don't have to do it.
Yeah.
There's no incentive.
We had to tell them you have to take it. But it's just frustrating that these are the educators of our future generations, and they're not wanting to learn about this education. I mean, Carly on a daily basis is doing grade 5 programs and teaching our future youth, but there's so many teachers out there that could use these programs, employers that could be using these programs. There's so many things that we should be doing, but again, there's only one Carly, only one Josh, and it's like, we need more of staff. We need to be doing this all over Canada and all over, obviously Ontario first, but again, $3 million, everyone. We're asking for $3 million. And if anything, that $3 million, I know I'm a broken record right now, that $3 million to the taxpayer is going to actually save you more money, because we're trying to keep the emergency room open so that when you actually do something a little more serious than a seizure, sometimes it will free up the room.
Yeah.
So it's just frustrating. We're asking for $3 million, and it's like, please contact your local MPP and say that you heard it from this great podcast. That, we need $3 million not to fund one epilepsy organization, but 14 across Ontario, because 1 in 100 Canadians have epilepsy. And we're trying to keep programs and services free so that you don't feel isolated, you don't feel alone, you don't feel like, anyways, I'll try to contain myself, but it's just frustrating.
No, it is. I mean, I've been ranting this whole time too. It is frustrating. I'm getting red. Like, I'm like physically, like all the blood is rushing to my head because it's such a frustrating topic, because all you can do is talk about it.
But Jessica, you brought up such a good point just from Sunny Days Camp. I appreciate that you brought something up personal. Your son saw someone have a seizure. David's our CEO. David always gives that example about one of the great things about Sunny Days Camp is because he's heard stories of children getting bullied because, oh, a seizure's this, seizure's that. When someone actually has seen someone else have a seizure that's never seen a seizure before, oh, that's not a big deal. It actually helps them feel a little bit better about having seizures, about having epilepsy, because they see it as like a normal thing. They see how the counselors deal with someone having a seizure. They see that it's comfortable. It's okay. It's just part of your day. Like,
yeah, it normalizes it. Like, it doesn't make it seem as like weird and like like, because if you have seizures, you're not seeing yourself having a seizure usually. So it's like, yeah, it's good to like give that kind of outward experience, especially to children that are getting bullied all the time.
Yeah,
I know this is going to sound like a line, but I'm telling you this, and Carly's heard me say this loud and clear. People with epilepsy are the strongest people I've ever met in my entire life. I trip on my couch earlier today, and I'm depressed for the rest of the day. Someone that has a seizure, they'll have a seizure in front of me, and I'm like throwing things out of the way to make sure they're okay. And then they come to and they look at me and they're like, "Trevor, are you okay?" Wait, I'm okay. He's had a seizure, and I'm like, making sure they're okay, and I'm like pushing couches out of the way and everything, and they're worried about me. And they're just like, "Oh, this is just part of my normal. I'm fine." And that's why we call people with epilepsy warriors. They're normal. And I'm like, I stub my knee, and I'm like depressed for the rest of the day. That's just their normal, and it just is frustrating to just hear the roadblocks that they deal with, and because they're like the strongest people I know.
Yeah, I like having a kid. My son's homeschooled right now, but we had so much issues with the school dealing with him. He went through like behavioral issues when he was started a new medication, and just things like that, and they just weren't getting it. And I don't know if you've seen them, Carly, but when you have a kid with epilepsy, you have to fill out a separate form when you're registering them for school, and all it talks about is first aid. And I'm like, there's no first aid with my son's seizures. He stands through them. He talks through them sometimes. They last 2 seconds. Like, you just have to understand he might have missed something when you spoke. But there was no, like, line for, how to deal with, it was just first aid. And I was like, okay, what do I write here? I don't have anything to write. I just like,
and the way that I like to answer that, actually, what I'll say for absent seizures is a lot of the time the first aid is patience.
That's actually great. I'm writing that when my son goes back to school this September.
Yeah, please do,
Patience,
because I find that's all you can really do. These seizures are not a medical emergency. You might have to repeat things a few times, and like I said, have patience, but there's not a whole lot you have to do. Even with the more potentially dangerous seizures, it's really not a whole lot that you have to do in general to keep someone safe. It's just a few simple measures that you can do to keep someone safe. But if you don't know them, it just seems like such a scary, like unfathomable thing. And I find that like Trevor had mentioned, like, so the people who are used to it, to them, they're more worried about, other people, and, what are they going to think of me? Is this going to traumatize them? Or I've had some of my clients, when we are in outings and they have a seizure, they apologize. And that's one of my, kind of pet peeves in a good way, because I'm like, please do not apologize to me for having a seizure. You had no control over it. Yeah. It didn't inconvenience me. All I had to do was make sure, you were safe, and let's get back to enjoying the game, or, what we were doing. Yeah. Or if not, have a seat, take a rest, and let me know when you feel better.
And I think it's funny that we talk about these places, these people that should have this first aid, like teachers and police officers. I worked at Walmart, and they offered first aid to anybody who wanted it. And it was like they had a tiny little bit, not as much as they should, tiny little bit touch on like seizures, and it was just you just be supportive and make sure they're safe. Like you don't do anything, you're just there, and you're just like just be. It's more aftercare is the most first aid for seizures is like making sure they feel better about themselves. So, and it's funny, like I was getting paid minimum wage company, and I was offered this type of first aid when there's these other governmentally funded professions that could easily have this first aid, and it's obsolete. Like it's insane to me.
I
Yeah,
keep
no charge
referring
too.
to that. I keep referring to our other interview, and so you need to put a link below about the interview. I apologize. But like, if that police officer dealt with Marcus, please Google Marcus Charles.
Mhm.
If he, instead of tasing Marcus, just simply even gave him a hug, or just made sure he walked with Marcus to sort of make sure he was comfortable, push things out of this gentleman's way, that makes more of a difference to help someone living with epilepsy or having a seizure than trying to hold this gentleman down or to tase this gentleman. I know I'm going all over the place. I apologize.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
That's the theme of our podcast.
Yeah, we usually are too.
My point that I'm saying is Carly, myself, Josh, anyone working in an epilepsy organization or dealing with people that have epilepsy, we've all maybe been kicked in areas we don't want to be kicked with making sure someone with epilepsy is safe. But we don't take it personal, right? Someone with a police officer that, you know, getting kicked should not be tasing. You know what I mean? So it's just frustrating.
Yeah, it really like that story like scared me, you know, because I mean my son's a tall kid. He's gonna be 6'1" when he's done growing, and if he has a seizure and a cop sees him, you know, it's not something you want to think about because it shouldn't be something you have to think about.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry for going backwards on this and going to another topic, but you know, you brought up a good point. It's just the fact that sometimes it's just compassion. You know what I mean? Just simply, you know, helping and just, you know, pushing things out of the way. And, you know, Carly, you've heard this story 100 times with David and I at one of our previous offices with one of our interns. Having seizures in front of us is just, it's our norm dealing with people with epilepsy. But literally, we were pushing things out of the way, and this person had epilepsy, and he was having seizures, and he was throwing things, he was kicking around, and we were not holding him down. But we were making sure he was safe, putting a pillow under his head, I got kicked in the private area. Excuse my bluntness, and it was not. I did not like
PG.
I know. I was like, that wasn't even blunt.
Spoiler alert! I don't like getting hit in that area. I apologize. I do not like it, and it was not nice. But guess what? I didn't retaliate.
He just wakes up from his seizure. You're just like,
Sorry,
bam.
in the area. Bam. No,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just like it happens. That's just, you know, I understand that. A police officer should understand that someone having a seizure might do some things, and you don't hold them down. You don't.
No.
Not only do you not hold them down, you don't get a tase device and tase them. So, anyways, I'm going backwards on another topic just because you said, like, sometimes a simple being a little bit of compassion or being patient, or at the very least letting something ride out, can do amazing things, you know?
Like literally doing absolutely nothing would have kept him safer than what they did.
It's true.
Like, yeah, maybe he would have, you know, had a little tongue bite or walked into something and, you know, hurt an arm or something like that. But I mean, if you're going to go to that extreme to, you know, tase somebody, please choose nothing over that.
Yeah,
you know?
just do nothing.
If you're not going to help someone, don't harm them.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if you are able to legally hold a weapon, You should have training about this stuff.
Right.
Like that's just like I feel like that's like the bare minimum of being able to like hold a gun or like hold a taser. It's like no, basic first aid would be cool.
And they
When
have
not to pull out
programs
your
in
gun and when not to
place.
pull out your taser. Like,
Mhm.
Yeah, and I just learned this not too long ago that they do have, programs in place that are supposed to stop this from happening. So I don't know if you guys know about, I believe it's a vulnerable persons list where, if you have a medical condition where, you can't communicate sometimes or your behavior might, come off as odd, the police have this database where there's a description of you. There is, exactly what you look like, your name, all your diagnoses, what these seizures look like and what to do. And if they were to just, type somebody's name into this database, they would have all that information so readily available to them, but it doesn't even cross their mind that this could be a vulnerable person. They just think the worst, especially with focal unaware seizures. A lot of the time, people have no idea they exist and they assume the person is drunk or on drugs, and then they treat them like they are.
And
And
if
then
you're
that
drunk and on
person-
drugs, you deserve to get tased.
That's right.
Apparently.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it's like even when that's the logic, it still doesn't make sense.
Yeah, like this guy's just trying to finish his shift and get that Canadian Tire and go home to his family. Like, what are you seeing so threatening? At this point, you've been told he's having a seizure. If you're scared, he's not running. Just walk away.
If you're scared, you shouldn't be a police officer. I will link to the previous episode we had Trevor on, where we did talk about this case specifically, and we had like the link to the petition, everything in the description there. So I will put that below just so that everyone who wants to listen to that can. So we talked a lot about lack of funding. So what are ways that the average person can support? We did talk about emailing and sending letters to all the MPs and government. Anyone, tag Justin Trudeau in all your tweets. I don't know.
There's multiple ways to help, and we're not asking the public to do a lot. Like whatever they can do, whether it be simply going to our website, which all of you have been kind enough to put below here, epilepsysco.org. There's many ways they can donate, whether it be just going to our website. There's whether they do an email transfer, whether they call our office, whether they donate through our Canada Health page, whether the public themselves want to create a GoFundMe page, whether they want to go on Facebook and do a birthday fundraising. There's multiple way,s and we're not expecting the public to raise millions of dollars. But even if one person raises $100, if everyone raised $100, and there's over 260,000 Canadians out there, right?
Yeah.
Basically, we're just asking the public to do what they can, to keep these programs and services free. So if they go to our website, there's all the ways that they can donate. They can, we're asking the public to do what they can. And if they can't themselves, they don't have the means to fundraise themselves, they might know some people that might be able to. They might know some companies that have a lot of money that they don't know what to do with. Have them connect with us and we can send them a sponsorship package. There's, but that's why we have Carly here to talk about what that money's used for, and I'm here to talk about how to get the money to us, and Carly can, use that money to keep these programs going. But it's just, we need your help. And again, if it's not with your pocketbook, help with spreading the word. Share this podcast. Get as many people listening to the podcast so that you understand what Carly does 9 to 5 and on her personal time, on evenings and weekends. Look at what we're doing at 9 o'clock on a Friday night, right? It's Friday night, and you and I, Carly and I, are here talking about this, right? Because it means something to us. So, we're asking the public to please, if they can't grab money out of their wallet, tell 10 people that they know what to do,
Well, and like we really appreciate that because, like I said, epilepsy touches myself personally, like my family personally, and now Sonia's. Sorry, Sonia. You know, anyone that has a brain.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so like I mean, even us, we got connected just because I chose Epilepsy South Central Ontario as my choice of charity for the Opinionated Lushes December live stream that we do, which we will be doing again this year, and I'm choosing you guys again this year. So I'm doing my part, listeners. So please try and do your part. We appreciate.
Jessica,
Yeah,
you're not even the average. You're like above and beyond. Like if everyone out there listening did a third party event, oh my God, I would be so happy. Jessica, what you've done for us just with these podcast interviews and obviously what you did with fundraising, we can't thank you enough, right? If someone out there listening could even do half of what you've done, we would be.
I couldn't do it without my bitches, so that's what those two are for.
I appreciate each and every one of you. It's just to say that, like, that's why, Jessica, we're putting you on the spot. We want you at the Family and Youth Conference. Carly, tell Jessica, put her on the spot. She needs to bring her and her son to the Family and Youth Conference because it would be, you need to understand why we fundraise, why it's important. And it's a fun time, you know, and it's educational, but it's also just about being around a campfire and just networking and talking and just, it's
No,
a beautiful
we would like me and my son would definitely want to go. So Carly, if you can like send me an email after this with like the dates.
I would be so happy to. I can tell you right now, I believe it's September 22nd to 24th.
And for the viewers listening, keep that Family and Youth Conference going so someone like Jessica can bring her son there, because obviously you're hearing from Jessica the roadblocks that she deals with and having her son. Like, this is why we do these family youth and conferences. So, you know, help keep these programs and services going. Like, I feel like I sound like I'm on a telethon right now. I apologize. But it's just, yeah, you know.
Well, is there anything else you two want to plug? I mean, we'll have links below for everything. So I just want to make sure if there's anything else you two want to plug. Or if that was it.
I mean, we could go all night probably if we really wanted to, but we probably would end up going in circles because that's what the epilepsy, medical side of the community tends to do, is put people around in circles. So it's like we're constantly going around in these unnecessary circles too, following their lead and trying to fix, things that they might have, forgot or, just not cared about, and myths that they might still believe, or terminology that they're using that isn't correct anymore. So we want to break that cycle.
Yeah.
Let me just switch to you guys, put you on the spot. Is there one question each of you have for Carly and myself to put you on the spot? What's one thing you want to learn about epilepsy, or is there a myth you've heard, or is there any frustration you've heard? Put Carly and myself on the spot to end this with.
I would like to know how to start something like what you guys, your supports in my area. So in New Brunswick, we only have one support group, and that's all the way in Halifax. So that's like a 6-hour drive away. How does someone get something started in their province or town, city, to get education and support?
I guess I can answer that in the sense that, the Canadian Epilepsy Alliance, which is the umbrella of all the organizations, sort of acts to support areas that aren't covered by an agency. So if there's not an agency in that particular area, I mean, of course, we try our best to connect that client or that person with the closest agency. But if there's not, I mean, in this new world after the pandemic, everything is a lot of times over Zoom. So whether it be just trying to keep, people creating awareness or advocate, I mean, are you dealing with an issue with a particular agency or I'm not sure, but we can sort of connect you to sort of help if there's roadblocks in that regard. But we always try to motivate the public to try to do third-party events or do different things to create awareness, because there's only 22 agencies out there, unfortunately. So there's only so much those agencies can do. So sometimes it would be great if the public can do some things too to create awareness as well.
Thanks.
Do you have anything, Dawn?
No, not really.
Classic Dawn fashion.
Yeah, I don't got nothing.
I know I said this last time, Don, but like honestly, you need to tone it down. Like you talk way too much.
There's so much talking.
And all the talking right now, all of it.
My question to end this on is just of course I would assume you two would be willing to come back on another time, probably, you know, closer to the family day. What was it?
The whole weekend, our family.
The whole
conference.
weekend, yeah.
I would love to come back, and I will make sure not to speak before my colleague Carly because
Maybe even like after the, you know, so that we could talk about, you know, my son's experiences and like me being there and that kind of thing. Even talking about it like after.
Can we do like a remote podcast, like at the conference, and make?
We could probably do a live stream like on our platform. I could probably set that up. I don't know if I'd be able to bring a whole mobile podcast up.
Yeah.
You know what? It's a few months away. I can figure it out.
Yeah.
I can figure it out. I got
know,
time.
yeah.
Fire right behind you. It'll be you'll be at one with nature. It'll be great.
Ooh. Well, thank you again, Carly and Trevor from Epilepsy South Central Ontario, for being on and talking about this subject because it's personally important to a lot of us. I mean, this whole podcast is just us being angry. So that's epilepsy in Ontario in a nutshell, anyway. And New Brunswick.
And New Brunswick, yeah.
Well, thank you again. And I will link the previous episode Trevor was on below and all the links, you know, to see them and support them and everything else below. Again, please share, tweets, hashtag, Instagram, whatever it takes, just to let people know you have a brain, you have the potential for a seizure. So anyways, good night.
And it can happen anytime, any place, anywhere. It doesn't discriminate age-wise. You know, it could happen at any time. So I'll leave everyone with that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And I'm honored that you had me. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Carly. We need to clone you. That's what we're raising money for.
That's right. Cloning.
Well, if we get the machine, we're going to need a few more of you too to, you know, spread the word. So yeah. We're good on the science part of this.